guys, we're going to rip this TPI apart today. So, everybody complains that this intake is so hard to get apart. It's really not that bad, especially if you have power tools. So, let's go over what you need real quick. At minimum, a ratchet, obviously. You're doing this out of the car, so you could use a shorter extension, but this is awesome in the car, 12-inch extension. You need a universal swivel or U-joint, universal joint, whatever you prefer to call it, and 10 millimeter for the throttle body. So if you have, an impact gun, good idea. Get one on eBay if you can't. Not even just for this project, just in general. It's worth it in the amount of life you save when you don't have to use a good option. Milwaukee battery, cordless ratchet. Good choice too, but it's kind of weak on the power. I find myself coming back to the impact gun a lot. But it's great in tight spaces, so let's get into it. Say a little mechanics trick. Wrap your swivel socket in tape. Makes it less limp dick-like and just a little more firm, but it's still flexible enough to get into these little tight spaces where you need them, especially getting over the wiring harness on the TPI intake. So yeah, like I said, we're going to start with this throttle body. Supposed to need it tight. And someone put a bigger bolt in that one, so I'll have to deal with that real quick. So we got that bolt out. Threads look a little chewed up. That actually goes right through. Yeah, they go through on both sides. So that's no big deal, but a little bit of porting action here. Looks like it goes in pretty far, and they knocked down some of the walls in there. It's pretty cool, I guess. Just so you can see in there, they really knocked it down and reduced turbulence a little bit, I guess. There's some spider webs in there. I'm sure that's great for performance, but yeah, whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the runners. I think this is what intimidates most people, especially in the car. If you can imagine, there's a wiring harness here, so you can't really see the bottom bolt. There's bolts that come into the runners from the opposite sides, stuff like that. Like, I kind of get why this is intimidating, but these aren't that bad. They're not that bad at all. So I always start with the plenum. You get these out first. Like I said, long extension, swivel socket. You won't have to do this kind of half-ass shit to make sure you can get your fucking tools in there, because this is ridiculous. This is why it's impossible to find clean TPI runners anymore for a reasonable price, because every fucking lazy-ass mechanic or fucking redneck in their backyard smashes this thing to pieces trying to get their fucking socket in there. But ran over. Let's get this off. I wish I was filming so you could have heard this, but these two took a very unreasonable amount of torque to get them out. Completely stopped my impact gun, and this is a like 14-inch ratchet or something to that effect, and I was leaning into it hard, and when it finally cracked, it was a hell of a crack. I wish you could have heard it. Yeah, like I said, unreasonably tight. You can just kind of pop the plenum off. Usually a vacuum line for EGR, map sensor if you have one. Make sure you get that, or if it's already broken, then you just take it out. And let's see if we got anything else cool here. These maybe were port matched or something. They look all ground up and not too great, so who knows? Maybe they were? Who knows? It looks like a little DIY port match. If we overlay the upper intake gasket here, you can kind of see that they tried to just grind it down for sake of that little extra bit of performance. Grab another plenum for comparison's sake. You can see in there that's blended. That's kind of interesting. I'm gonna go grab another intake just to compare. Here's another. This is a stock 89 and up TPI intake, and if you can see, I mean, they did a little bit of a port match. They're basically the same size, but if you can see in the in the plenum. There's still sort of like a blended transition there, but they took the time to smooth it out on this one, which is kind of cool. I picked this up. I guess I didn't talk about this. I buy TPI, complete TPI intakes from people who are giving them up, especially if it comes to the harness and everything. I take them. I do conversions on other cars, or I just strip them and sell them for parts and use them on my own cars and stuff like that. So I got this one pretty cheap. I didn't really have high hopes for it, especially when I saw how smash the runners were and stuff like that. I was kind of like, oh, this is going to be interesting, but it turned out to be a little better than I expected. Lower runner bolts out, that's where this gets fun. So like I said, there's bolts that come in from the back, and it's missing on the front for this set, but they come in from the back or up here. And the best way to get that one is passenger side of the car, lean up near the hood hinge, reaching down towards the distributor hold down, which would be like right here. With the swivel socket, you should be able to get in there, hit it with your impact, hit it with your battery ratchet, hit it with whatever, spin that right out. And something crucial when you're putting these back together, and it's a mistake a lot of people make, is that bolt and this bolt, but make sure they're all tight. These are sort of well known for vacuum leaks because they have fucking 4, 5 upper intake gaskets, including the throttle body gasket, as well as the lower intake gaskets themselves. So you can see where that can cause issues, and a lot of people hate these intakes just because of that. So these bolts here on both sides, especially the passenger side, I would wager are going to be the hardest ones to get to. The wiring harness and its loom lays across this area kind of in between the valve cover and the runner and really blocks these. But swivel socket, like I said, you can kind of sneak in there, kink it down, and get enough bite to get it out without stripping it pretty easily. Can't tell if they tried to port match this or what, but there's definitely like a little transition here, a little ramp into the intake, and there's some aluminum burrs in here, but if you can, it's kind of hard to tell, but the gasket is bigger than the port, so they have their little transition there, but there's a lip first, so like, yeah, pointless. Runners are off. Pop fuel rails out. Obviously, disconnect your fuel lines first, and then there's 4 10mm on top of the fuel rails, and you just buzz them out. I'm really going to have to go through this and chase a lot of these threads before I sell it, because this is an old impact. It's like 10 years old, give or take a few. I bought it used from somebody, but it was pretty much brand new when I got it, and it doesn't have a whole lot of torque, and it's old, and it's basically a very early electronic impact, but this thing can take a lot of heat, gets a lot of stuff out, and you shouldn't be struggling with bolts like these in aluminum that aren't really torqued to much. And once the bolts are out, you just pull up on the intake. If they're really, really stuck, really, really old petrified ones I've seen, where you need a pry bar, and you'll just pull the injectors out, and they kind of help hold it in there. It wouldn't be a bad idea. Get new injector O-rings while they're out. Save yourself some headaches, because the runners have to come off to do the injectors. You can't get the fuel rail off without taking the whole intake apart. So take lots of caution here. So generally, when I take these apart, I leave the EGR valves on. I leave the water necks on. It's not terribly common for these water neck bolts to be seized in the intake, and then you have to drill them out, and that's not a good time. So, yeah, this is where the video is over. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps.